Welcome to Tabletop Talks 10A. This is going to be a little bit of a subsequence. We're going to be looking at winter warfare in Advanced Squad Leader. 10A is going to look at falling snow, and it is going to look at ground snow. 10B, which will be 2 weeks after this one, that's going to look at deep snow. And then 10C is going to look at skis and achios and some of the kind of funky ways that you can move across snow quite quickly. So part of the thinking behind this is that me and Dave are bringing out a pack. It's going to be based a pack of scenarios with two new boards designed by Tom Rapetti. That's going to be based entirely in Norway. We've got a Norwegian helping us, a guy called Oyvind. Seems like a really great guy who's got some really good ideas for scenario design for actions that took place in Norway. The vast majority of actions that took place in Norway took place in the late winter and early spring of 1940, and there were winter conditions. Sometimes deep snow, sometimes ground snow. Sometimes the snow was falling. So I think that this is a really good idea, an opportunity to kind of like give people a refresher on those sort of like winter warfare rules, but also obviously to introduce this. Because we're always aimed basically at new and newer players, really good and clear and straightforward introduction to those rules for them. If you are a more experienced player, it might be that these are a useful refresher. And it is also worth saying that when me and Dave many years ago were playtesting Hakapali, that was some of the best ASL that I've ever played. Really enjoyed that, and it was that extra flavour. You know, everybody's kind of very conscious that you've got special flavour for PTO. You've got special flavour for seaborne assaults. You've got special flavour if you want to get into the desert or into the night. But actually the winter is also its own kind of like special ASL flavour. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to cover most important things, and we're going to point you in the direction of perhaps some of the more kind of like some of the more specialist or esoteric things. So you'll know where to look for those rules if you happen to be playing a scenario that involves them. But I won't go into a lot of detail about those sorts of things. So the first thing I want to talk about is falling snow. Falling snow only happens if by SSR, and falling snow is essentially an LV hindrance. Those people know what LV hindrances are can skip this bit, but it's just a basic LV hindrance, exactly like any other LV hindrance. So if it's snowing, you have a +1 to any shot beyond 6 hexes. That's the basic LV hindrance. If you, it doesn't though, like other hindrances, it doesn't negate FFMO, first fire movement in the open. It doesn't stop you from losing concealment if you assault move, and the only protection you have is an LV hindrance. Normally, if you assault move and there's a hindrance, you don't lose concealment, but this doesn't do that. It doesn't apply for that. It also doesn't reduce residual in the way that other other hindrances do. Okay. So here we have a Norwegian unit. It's going to take a shot with a medium machine gun at the German parachute half squad over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is falling snow. That is 6 hexes, so no LV hindrance applies. But if we move him just 1 hex further away, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so it's 7 or above, then we're getting a +1 because of that LV hindrance. That goes up if it is even further away. So every sort of like additional 6 hexes away, it's going to be an additional LV hindrance. So So first it's 7, then it's going to be above 13, isn't it? Okay, so if we take this example, the medium machine gun is now 13 hexes away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So beyond that is +1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Beyond that is going to be plus another one. So anything from sort of U1 plus is going to be +2. So this shot now is going to be a +2 LV hindrance. Now, quite apart from the fact, obviously it's long range for this medium machine gun and out of range completely for the squad, but we're not just thinking about the LV hindrances. And this would be the same if it was like sort of 20 hexes away, it'd be +3, 20 6 hexes away, etc. It goes up 1 each time. Snow can stop though. Snow can stop on a wind change dice roll of 3 or less. So basically on a double 1 or a 3, the snow on the wind change dice roll, any player's phase, the snow will stop. If it has stopped and the wind change dice roll is a 10, an 11 or a 12, then it will start again. You see that the mathematically the odds slightly favour snow starting rather than stopping. If it's already snowing and we've got this LV hindrance applying, and remember it doesn't really affect things that are quite close to you, it only affects things beyond 7 hexes. But if you roll a 10 in the wind change dice roll and it's already snowing, the intensity of that snow increases. There is only one additional level of intensity. It doesn't keep going up every time you roll 10. It's just there's snowing and there's a high intensity snowing. The high intensity snowing is exactly the same as a normal LV hindrance, except that now every shot, up to 6 hexes, up to and including 6 hexes, is going to get that +1. So now that medium machine gun firing at the unit in H5 is going to get a +1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That medium machine gun firing at J2 is going to get a +1. Firing it in L2, it's going to get a +2 because now it's beyond 6 hexes, so it's +2. And that will go the same if we went out to sort of 13 hex range. It would be +3. Interesting rule: if you have normal snowing or high intensity snowing, so either of those two types of snowing, and you roll 3 for the wind change dice roll or 2 for the wind change dice roll, the snow stops altogether. It doesn't decrease in intensity, it just stops altogether. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is winter camouflage. Infantry can have, so if it is snowing, or if there is ground snow, or if there is deep snow, units can be designated as having winter camouflage by SSR. Units that are designated by SSR as being ski equipped are also assumed to have winter camouflage. There are 3 effects of winter camouflage. The first is that anybody firing at an infantry unit beyond 8 hexes is going to get the benefit of there's a +1 dice roll modifier. So for example here, let's say it's still snowing, so it's just normal intensity snowing. This medium machine gun's firing at this German Panzer, I keep calling it Panzer, so this German parachute unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hexes away. It's more than 6, excuse me a minute. I don't know where that came from. It's more than 6 hexes, so they get a +1 for the LV for the snow, but because it's, that's it, just +1 for the snow, but it's only 8 hexes away. If this unit is 1 hex further away, it's now 9 hexes away, we still get the +1 for the LV for the snow, but now if that unit is designated as being in winter camouflage, it gets an additional +1. So basically, if you're wearing winter camouflage, in any kind of snowy conditions, you get +1 to shots beyond 8 hexes. The same applies to vehicles, but with vehicles, it's beyond 16 hexes. So I'm going to try and find myself a little vehicle. There we go. And we're going to find ourselves a little gun. I don't know whether historically this is a Norwegian gun or not. This is just a Allied minor gun. Okay, so it's firing at this tank over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's obviously over 16 hexes. The tank is designated as having winter camouflage. Whatever the to hit number is for that anti-tank, I'm not going to work it all out now, but whatever it is, we're adding an additional 1 at the end because that unit has winter camouflage. That only applies if it is beyond 16 hexes in range. There are some other benefits to winter camouflage. Let's say this half squad is down here in S2. The only Norwegian units on the board don't have line of sight to S2, and there's ground snow or it's snowing. And this unit is equipped with winter camouflage. And at the end of the German player turn, the German player is checking for concealment gain. He's not in concealment terrain, and he's out of line of sight, so he doesn't automatically gain concealment, but he can roll for it in the normal way. So obviously he's rolling 1 dice. You normally add the US number. The US number is normally easy to work out because it's the same as the depiction of, like, you've got the silhouette of 2 characters on the counter. Single man counter would be 1. US is US, and normal squad is 3, so you add the 3. So you're adding the 2. So you roll a dice, you add the 2 to it. If it's less than 6, then this unit is going to gain concealment. If it's wearing winter camouflage in a snowy scenario, then you can subtract 1 from that dice roll. So it makes it a little bit easier to gain concealment. Also, once you are concealed, there's a very, very significant benefit. Let's say you've got that Norwegian medium machine gun there, and you've got this German half squad is concealed. It wants to advance towards the medium machine gun. It wants to move into the open in I6, but it does it by assault move. Then it keeps concealment. At the end of its turn, it can also advance into H5 as long as it's assault moving or advancing, even in open terrain. If it's wearing winter camouflage, they can keep their concealment. So those are really the effects of winter camouflage. So the next thing I want to talk about, I'm trying to go through this somewhat quickly, really, is ground snow. Now, one thing that's always worth doing is if you are playing on Vassal, so you can't do this otherwise, but if you're playing on Vassal, you can go to terrain transformations, and you can have ground snow. So here we go. I haven't shut that down, so here we go, ground snow. So this is really, really good for the kind of like the flavour of playing the game. It's a shame you can't do it with real geomorphic boards, but it feels good if you're playing on Vassal, and it's meant to be in the Ardennes, or it's meant to be in the Eastern Front in the winter around Stalingrad or something. Playing on these boards is quite atmospheric, but it also helps to remind you to apply the ground snow rules. You can also set this to deep snow, but it also helps you with the ground snow rules to remember to apply them. The first of which is a terrain transformation, really, where marshes automatically become open terrain. I don't believe this board has any marshes on it normally, but if it did, this vassalised board would have changed it to open ground. Obviously, if you're playing face-to-face with traditional boards, you need to remember that any marshes are now open ground. Winter camouflage rules will apply, so if units have got winter camouflage, it applies when you've got ground snow. Very significantly, it freezes all streams. So they simply become open ground hexes or ordinary woods hexes or whatever, and the costs are to do with going in and out of them. But it also activates the ice rules. So a hex like this, like U7, suddenly becomes traversable. Infantry can run across U7 because the ice rules have been activated. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the ice rules, but things to check up if you're playing a rule where it matters are that the ice can collapse. OBA, for example, firing down onto ice, there are rules which can make it collapse, and obviously if there's any units on it, they are eliminated. There's a scenario called, I think it's called Red Dawn, in the action pack that was called Few Return by Mark Pickcabbage, and in that one the Russians are crossing a frozen river, and the Italians defending on the other side on the hills can bring OBA down and collapse. So it's the only scenario I've ever played where it kind of became quite a feature of the game. So look those rules up for collapsed ice if you think they're relevant to the scenario that you're playing. The other thing is that vehicles could cross U7, but there is a possibility that the vehicle's weight will collapse the ice. And those rules work exactly the same way as collapsed bridges. So some people listening to this might be quite familiar with the rules about bridges collapsing when vehicles go over them. But again, I'm not going to go into detail now, but there is a possibility when you roll vehicles across, look them up, those rules up in detail if you think that they're likely to apply. What other things change in with ground snow? Well, the next thing is that it's +2 to entrenching attempts. So it is much, much harder to entrench in ground snow, which I guess makes sense. Infantry have to pay an additional 1 movement factor whether they're going uphill or downhill, and this is one of the things that makes a gully is actually quite expensive to traverse. So, for example, moving down into here is now it's only a gully normally because the water's frozen. It's essentially only 2 to move down there, but you have to pay an additional 1 because you're changing levels in ground snow. So it costs 3 to move down there. In the same way, moving back up again, which would normally cost 2, 1 to go uphill, and double because of the because you're going, sorry, 1 to move into 04 and double because you're going uphill. You have to add an additional 1 to that. So it costs 3 movement points to move out of the gully up to there or down. It also affects road. There's one exception to that, and the exception to that is on ploughed roads. So by SSR, a road might be defined as ploughed. Let's say, for the sake of this scenario situation, this road has been defined as ploughed. If it's not defined by SSR as ploughed, then it's as though the road's not there as far as the infantry is concerned. But if it is ploughed, then they can move up there, and it costs just the normal 2 movement factors. So for the non-ploughed road, this would cost, to move from here to here, would cost 3. To move up would cost 3. On a ploughed road, it would only cost the normal 2. Coming down, coming down would only cost 1 on a ploughed road, where coming down would cost 2 on an unploughed road. Also, on unploughed roads, let's pretend that this one is an unploughed road, because we've got that one's ploughed in my mind now. You don't get road bonus. You can still get a road bonus on a ploughed road, but you don't get road bonus on an unploughed road in ground snow. So what about vehicles? Okay, so vehicles come in 2 flavours as far as snow is concerned. Tracked. So here's Panzer II. I think it's Panzer II. And this is very clearly a tracked vehicle. Now, the only real difference to tracked vehicles when they're in ground snow conditions is that they can't use the half a movement point road movement speed. So if this guy was to become crew exposed, in normal conditions it only costs a half to move from F3 along the road to G4 and then half to H4. It's always 1, whether you're crew exposed or whether you're buttoned up in ground snow for tracked vehicles. Okay, so that's quite straightforward. This vehicle is not tracked. Okay, so this is a wheeled vehicle. Wheeled vehicles pay an additional 1 movement point per hexside traversed. So this vehicle, to move to G4, is going to cost 2 movement factors, 1 to move into the hex and 1 to traverse the hex side. If at some point he was to go off the road, I don't know, moving into H3, then you would have to... Okay. So for an armoured car to move into H3 would normally be 3 movement points, but we're going to have to add 1 for the hex side traversed if it's in ground snow. So you can see how that additional point for every hex that you move, very, very quickly is going to eat into the movement factors of these units. So that's kind of it. I've finished, really. I hope you've enjoyed it, got something out of it. It will be exactly 2 weeks from this Friday that the second one of these 10B on deep snow will come out, and exactly 2 weeks after that we'll get the one on skiing and Akios. And it's going to be quite a while, I suspect, before the Norway pack comes out. But when it does, hopefully this will be a useful refresher for people. But in addition to that, there are lots of snow and ground snow scenarios out there for people to be enjoying this. So I hope you got something out of it. Thanks very much.